Welcome everyone for another episode of our Let's Dev with Unity, and today we're going to talk about online multiplayer with a very cool amount of guests. So we have with us Esteban Maldonado, which is another senior advocate at Unity, amazing coworker. We have Caleb Atwood, principal engineer of multiplayer services, and Johnny Thompson, developer and content creator. I will give them a chance to introduce each other, but before we do that, I see in the chat that we have people joining us from all over the world. Tell us right now, if you're watching, where you're from. We see France, Dubai, Denmark, San Antonio, Texas, Brazil, Kazakhstan. It's amazing to see the community around the world. I'm myself in Montreal, Canada right now, but I'm from Guadeloupe in the Caribbean. Super happy to talk about online multiplayer. So maybe Esteban, you can start by introducing yourself quickly.
Sure thing. So, hi everyone. My name is Esteban Maldonado. Like Manu said, I'm also part of the developer advocacy team. And for a few years now, you probably heard my voice somewhere in some presentations of talking about Netcode for game objects, Netcode for entities recently. And same as Manu, I'm also a proud Caribbean, but I'm from Puerto Rico. So yeah, happy to be here with you all today.
Awesome. What about you, Caleb?
Perfect. Hey everyone, Caleb. I'm calling in from London today. I am a principal engineer in multiplayer. I've been at Unity for maybe working on year 7. Before that, Xbox Live. My focus is in distributed real-time services. I did full stack for a while. I've specialized while here in matchmaking, lobby, session services. I consider myself a student of some of the Netcode experts out there. And yeah, just really excited to be here and diving into some of the great multiplayer stuff going on here at Unity.
Yes. And Johnny to finish?
Hey there, yeah, I'm Johnny. I run the Turbo Makes Games YouTube channel. I primarily focus a lot on Unity's data-oriented technology stack and their entity component system. And a little bit more recently, I posted a massive, like almost 6-hour-long tutorial course available for free for everybody on YouTube, where I basically go through creating a full game using Netcode for entities. So it was a super fun project, and I know we're going to be talking a lot about really cool multiplayer topics today. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
And we're happy to have you as well. So we have still people coming from India, Oslo, Norway, Felixstowe in the UK. That's awesome. So as you can see, Unity, even as employees, we're all over the world. And that makes amazing diverse teams, but also in terms of the complexity of the editor, we make it simple by having so much experts. So today it's a Let's Dev. What does that mean? That means we're going to deep dive into very technical examples, demos, and we're going to have also screen sharing so that you can get right into the editor with us. But we're also going to talk about what is online multiplayer. So maybe we can get started with our main part, which is the multiplayer summer. This is a list of events. I think Esteban, maybe you can speak a little bit on that.
Sure thing. So yeah, we are in the beginning of the multiplayer summer. It's an online event. It's full of cool resources. Now this stream is part of the multiplayer summer. There's gonna be two. Yeah, we're basically kicking it off. With at least with the live content. But there's gonna be two webinars on August 1st. I'm gonna be talking about accelerating your online multiplayer, and if you're able to maybe show the website. But there's going to be another webinar on August 15 as well. And as something really cool is that right now the Unity Learn team, they released a course on getting started with Netcode for game objects, and a big shout out to Thomas Winkley and the education team that at the end of July 30th, if I recall correctly, they're going to be doing the NetCheck series live stream. So if people remember, they did a live stream called Scope Check, which it was with Thomas, Joy, and Utsa, right? And it was 8 weeks of like pure development and like a bunch of wacky moments. But now they're taking that game that they made with that stream and converting online. So honestly, like I'm seeing how the project has grown, how they're working on it, and it's amazing. Oh, thank you very much. So this is the main website that we're gonna be able to register for the two webinars. And here we go. The second one is gonna be build a retention layer for a multiplayer game by Danny Dyer and Eduardo Ojeda. So lots of cool resources. Yeah,
Who's that handsome guy that just showed up?
that's the one. That's the webinar I'm going to be delivering on August 1st. And if you go a little bit below, you'll see the extra resources, and actually this stream being one of them. Like, hey, get ready for Let's Dev online multiplayer. So we're here in the present, basically.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can maybe move to our next section about single player versus multiplayer. So why make a multiplayer game, basically?
It's fun. But Caleb, as somebody that has been working on these tools and working on these services, like, what would you say to folks who like Inspire? Like, do you been part of the development of these tools? Like,
yeah, I think so. For why like people want to make multiplayer games, I mean, we have a lot of people in chat who can also comment on this, but they're fun and players like them, and they have great engagements and great retention, and there's business models that are really fantastic that go along with both competitive, cooperative, and community building typed multiplayer games. And just from a player perspective, I think a lot of us here play multiplayer games, so we know the type of feeling we get, right? Both from like social standing, but also just like having fun playing with friends. Every Tuesday, I moved here from Seattle recently, but every Tuesday I'd sit down and play with my friends from the games industry, and we'd sit down and play multiplayer games together. I think we all have stories like that too. And a lot of times it's also that like inspired vision, you just like, man, I've played a game and I just wish I could make something that took it one step further, or like did this one mechanic that I'm really interested in. And getting into that like prototyping phase and reaching out, we know that just from watching people engage with the forums and the content that people are interested in this.
Johnny, like what inspired you to get started in your development as well?
Yeah, I mean, as far as just like, why someone would want to make a multiplayer game, I think, of course, there's that whole aspect of like, wanting to play together with your friends, have like an awesome shared experience. But I think there's also a lot of like really cool challenge aspects with that. So like if you're playing a competitive multiplayer game, there's something really cool about, knowing that you're playing against another human and you're playing that whole kind of mind game. You're trying to outsmart them, out-strategize, outskill them and everything like that. You're not playing just against some robot who's been programmed to hunt you down and destroy you. You're playing against another human, and there's a lot of really cool aspects with that.
I like also just the history of multiplayer over time, like from couch gaming to now online, and still remember having to put like a cardboard on the half of my TV to make sure that my sister couldn't see what I see in my games.
I got a question for Johnny, Johnny, because I'm not giving away too much, hopefully, but your course, why did you choose the genre of MOBA? Like, were you inspired by some of the games you play, or? And by the way, Johnny will later talk more about his course. But
yeah. So in the course that I mentioned kind of at the beginning, it is like a MOBA game similar to, a League of Legends or a Dota, something like that. So yeah, when I was kind of considering what type of game that I wanted to create for this, I wanted something that could be competitive, that could kind of really show off all the advantages of Netcode for entities, while still being like kind of like a simple project where, we're not having to like create some big real-time strategy game or something like that. And also I haven't really seen a lot of other kind of MOBA tutorials, especially Unity focused ones. So I thought there was just kind of a lot of good things that, seemed to make it fit. So I'm super happy with it.
Oh yeah.
So we see a lot of comments in the chat. Obviously, we cannot answer everything, but we do have people in the chat that will be trying to moderate and give answers. And some of your questions will actually be answered a little bit later in the stream. So follow along, and you'll see some of those answers popping up through the conversation. So what is our next section? We talked a little bit about what made Caleb and Johnny start in their sections of multiplayer. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the pros and the cons now.
At least for me, like one of the biggest pros is like what we said, like that the way that you can make an experience that you can share, that you can share with other players. Now, the con is like definitely development and even you could say cost, like depending on what kind of services you would like to use for when you're hosting your game and taking online. But even before all of that, just that mindset change from making single player games to multiplayer games. Like even even like when you get started and you start thinking like when you're making a server, let's say for example a server authority game. And when I say server authority, I mean the way that the connection is structured for devices to connect and communicate one another, where there's going to be one entity that is going to be holding like the state of the world. But and this is something that I mentioned in some of my talks, but like that mindset of okay, now I'm dealing with my real version of my own player that I'm controlling. But in your own game code, you have to deal with the code of what would be the code, visual representation or the replication of the other player in your device. You got to deal with that as well. When you start building this, is gonna be, that was one of my biggest hiccups. Like Johnny and Caleb, like maybe how was it for you? What were one of the biggest hurdles? Yeah,
I can hop in. I think fundamentally when you go from I have local memory and local CPU cores that I can deal with that memory, and I can update a single device one step forward in a frame. I think one of the biggest hurdles of multiplayer, and this is why Netcode is like such a big specialization, right, is that now I have multiple devices, and this latency between the devices is real and in a lot of places like unmitigatable. Netcode is there to present to you all the different like techniques that you would want to use, so you have strong control over how to deal with that lag and compensate for it and reconcile. And as you introduce and like onboard to that, you're also forced to understand the authority. Someone has to make decisions because two people stepping forward in their frame and their game fundamentally disagree. And that's the nature of it. And they won't be reconciled for 10 milliseconds, 150 milliseconds. What that ceiling is, how you manage that budget, the expertise that goes with applying the netcode techniques into your game. There's a phrase that I think a lot of people use regularly, which is when you add multiplayer to your game, you add complexity. And you hear that key phrase at a lot of the top of almost every talk is like, multiplayer games are hard. And it's kind of talking about this mental shift, that paradigm of how you approach it. That's why planning for it from the beginning is so critical. You can getting into a prototyping mindset with multiplayer first kind of forces you to tackle that problem. If you want to move off device, which is why a lot of prototyping, right, is done local initially, but then you do still have to get into production phase and make that leap. Johnny, you've actually had some experience like doing that. I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that one important point to bring up is you also need like a really good kind of fundamental understanding of just kind of how like general networking concepts work. Like, just the very basics of how does one computer talk to another. Because if you're just creating like, single player video games, that's something that you're never really going to need to encounter at any point necessarily. Now, luckily I come from an IT background, so I have pretty good fundamental understanding of just kind of, networking concepts. And that's been extremely helpful for me when I started making more multiplayer games and things like that, where I had kind of some idea about how to go about debugging different problems, kind of, investigating when things were going wrong, because I kind of have a little bit of a fundamental understanding of, IP addresses and ports and TCP versus UDP. Now, luckily, with something like Netcode for game objects, Netcode for entities, Unity takes care of a lot of that complexity for you. But at some point, something's still going to go wrong, and you're still going to have to kind of debug things. And so it's good to kind of have like some kind of fundamental understanding of just like the general concept of computers and servers talking to each other.
So now let's dive a little bit deeper. What is multiplayer? But like really though, what does it mean?
Well, I will say like jumping off from Johnny's point, because it's true. Like you like early in the past, people had to make like that actual layer of code. Like the reason why it's called Netcode for game objects, Netcode for entities, is because that is an actual kind of extra layer that people needed to add, like that is taking data from the main game engine that renders the world, the UI, and then takes what is important to other players and takes it around. And in the past, people had to remake that layer basically every time. Now, with these two solutions and other solutions that have come up, like all of that is done for you. So by implementing all of these pre-made layers of code, like these are saving you hours, like I don't know how many, maybe months of work, like, but definitely a lot of saving you a lot of work, and that also includes like the lower level transport layer, which is yet another layer of code that was like, okay, now this data, how do we split it up and send it into packets? So so Johnny was mentioning like UDP and TCP IP addresses and ports. Like this is layers of code, like very low level of code that like does not have to do like this. When you're at this level, this really doesn't have to do anything with whether you're making an RPG, whether you're making an action game, a shooter. Like no, that is even boilerplate code.
Have that.
Yeah.
John, do you have something you want to add? Otherwise, I can maybe.
Well, yeah, I was just going to kind of say, like, yeah, for like, what exactly is a multiplayer game? I mean, really, what you're trying to do is synchronize, game state between multiple computers. And so that you're not necessarily syncing, everything under the sun, but really you kind of need to focus on just, the specific things that are changing. So if, one person is controlling a player, you need to make sure that that player's position and any attacks they might be doing or anything like that is all kind of synchronized across the other computers that you want to be, all connected in your multiplayer. So that's kind of like the broad general goal of what you're trying to achieve, is just that kind of data synchronization across multiple devices.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good triangulation. There's just to kind of like pop it up one layer and then kind of re-triangulate on that as we go into the next topic. I think we all have like an intuitive sense of multiplayer, as John's just talking about, like synchronous gameplay. And as you sort of move a little bit more towards asynchronous, like casting, when a player casts a spell, it can have sort of a delay. As that delay increases, you get closer to like asynchronous multiplayer, which is still a group of players playing live or maybe in turns on their devices. And then you get into like the fringe is also there as well, like things like leaderboards. Once you show a score in your game, it technically goes out into like the social space of multiplayer, these social media sites. I think at some point the fringe transitions into something else. So it's useful to think of multiplayer in the context of synchronous, largely real-time or near real-time gameplay of players that are trying to do something and they're present doing the thing on their devices. And so, two players playing a game in a reasonable amount of time, or maybe 100 players playing a game together. Maybe you could also consider like getting up to the thousands and tens of thousands, but at some point it becomes shaped like something else and you need different technology. Once you're really high, I think you start needing things like web scale, database style technologies and advanced web techniques. What's so great about multiplayer is, as Johnny was talking about those core ideas earlier, things like sending packets, how you serialize your game to devices communicating. And then as Esteban's talking about like how those are then wrapped and given to you to be productive, those are kind of geared very much towards those reasonably scaled multiplayer synchronous real-time experiences. And that's kind of the focus of Netcode and what I think a lot of what the industry and what we at Unity have been up to kind of focuses on.
How can we make the experience of playing a multiplayer game feel like it's the same experience but for both players?
that is the $64 million question. Well, they're definitely, and this will definitely leave it up to more to like Caleb and Johnny with the more development experience. But like one of the first things I would say is like one of the first things that you start to that you're gonna learn when you're starting, even at the beginning, is like you need to send data across the internet. So like you need to send purely the only data that you need in order to make that game as efficient as possible. Like for example, like you've seen in other games, you've seen in other games like a player is shooting another one, and then it changes the animation like, oh, you got me, I'm dead. Like you're not gonna send all of the entire animation data, like the bones or the name of the frame. No, you probably send like just maybe one bit or whatever small value you need that tells the client, hey, play dead, you just got killed, and then the person that just got defeated on their device, the game goes, oh, I need to play dead now, and then they die. But rather than acting out, kind of being a little bit dorky, like Caleb and Caleb, starting with you, can you please go a little bit into more the technical details of what that actually means?
Sure. And I'll also say that we have some links coming towards the latter half of this, where we kind of, like we stand on the shoulders of giants in a big way. When you go and read the documentation for like Unity, Netcode for game objects, or Netcode for entities, the team has done a great job like detailing the concepts, the terminologies, the techniques, and like when to apply them. Things like server rewind and client prediction, and we should talk about those a little bit here. I think, right? But even standing on a ton of amazing resources that are out there, I personally, Gaffer for Games has a like networked game deep dive. Johnny's nodding his head; he knows what I'm talking about. And there's material like that. I think there's a couple other. If you go and Google some, there's a GitHub game networking resources. And if you're, like Johnny was saying earlier, as a siren goes off in the corner, as you're like getting into this, I think there's some great starter material to go and like onboard to some of those initial concepts. So back to like bits flying over the network and like how to deal with the bits. Yeah, I mean, there's I've updated some information about my game. Some amount of that information is relevant to what the other player's device needs to see. That other player's device also stepped forward in its own simulation at some, rates, 30 times a second, 60 times a second, depending on if it's the physics loop. And I need to say something about what happened in my game. And so there's a couple, like a pipeline of serialization and messaging techniques. And there's different netcode techniques that we need to talk about. But at some point, I'm going to send a packet of information or a series of packets of information, and I'm going to attach a number to that and say, hey, this thing happened at this point in time for me. And Johnny's machine is going to get that packet a couple milliseconds in the future, right? Depending on our latency between our devices or whether we're going through like a relay. And then it's going to receive it. He will have stepped forward in time in his own, and now he needs to deserialize that, take a look at what happened in my game. There's different techniques for like things like snapshotting and how you apply the snapshots. Yeah. And now like I've also received his packets. Now we're both out of sync. This is the fundamentals, right? We're both out of sync. And now our devices need to reconcile with what's happening together. This is where things like host authority start to matter. One of us, if it's a peer-to-peer game, so there's no additional server or service involved, one of our devices kind of needs to start making some calls about what the actual state of the game is going to be, and then send back any additional adjustments about that new state that the other client needs to now actually reconcile against. So mutual reconciliation, there's approaches, but the general consensus seems to be that we're going to have a host. We'll talk about distributed authority later, which is a slightly different approach. But yeah, if I own an object, I need to say kind of what happens to that object, and everyone else sends inputs or changes that they'd like to make to it, and I let them know about changes about what actually happened, and then they try to catch up effectively. And that's the techniques of catching up. How you use them is what ultimately makes it feel like the game is actually synchronous.
And based on what you said earlier about that GitHub, we found the link and shared it in the chat, so don't hesitate to find that curated list of multiplayer game network programming resources. Thanks for that, Caleb. Maybe we can talk a little bit about Netcode. A lot of people have asked in the chat what it is and how can we use it. So maybe a little description.
Sure. So Netcode for game objects is like that Netcode solution that we're talking about, like sharing necessary data in between devices. But one of the cool things, like it's not just that it's a Netcode solution, a Netcode layer already made for you, but also comes in with a lot of components. Like, say for example, one of the first things that you start to do is when you learn how to make these multiplayer games is synchronizing movement. So something pre-built components that help you synchronize that data already come in with a network, and it's literally called the network transform, or the client network transform if you're controlling a player, like something that you need more dynamic movement. Like if you were trying to make like a not so precise action game, but these components already come built in. And in fact, one of the first things you'll see when you implement them is that you'll see some checkboxes along what kind of values in the position, scale, or rotation. Why is that? Because like we said before, like sending the necessary data is what is important. If you were making maybe a 2D game, then really, and none of the objects are going to be moving backwards or forward from the camera, then you can take away that you can take away that value from the synchronization. Like you don't need to ever send across the internet that flow value. And if your objects are not going to scale, then you can remove you can just take away any of the scale values. So you never need to send that scale over. So those are some of those and again, that's just literally like the tip of the iceberg of like what these features are.
And I remember I was with Esteban in Sao Paulo a couple of weeks ago. So we do these talks where we present across the world with the U Day. Those are Unity Day. So if you're anywhere in the world where there is a U Day happening, best believe it's happening. There was Seattle, I think, yesterday with Esteban.
Seattle was yesterday.
His hometown, which is very cool. And you have this concept of layers, and I think that was very visual and really helped people understanding where you have this gameplay layer, the transport layer, the netcode layer, and understanding that help people kind of wrap their head around what is netcode. But I have this question around also when we talk about online and that difference with multiplayer local and online. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more later about it, but maybe you can give a little glimpse of that difference.
At least for me, but I'll let Caleb and Johnny like go into more technical details. But one of the things that you can do, and in fact in Unity 6 you can go ahead and like even add a network simulator, and this you can do it for Netcode for entities and Netcode for game objects. So I have ways for you to like simulate what would be your game, testing your game in your own computer. Because when we say testing locally, that means in the computer that you're developing your game, you can go in and play your game, and you can put like fake lag or a higher ping to simulate what would be if your game was already online and already people were joining, and for some reason they encountered weirdness in the internet, like their quality went down, like their internet cut off. Like that's a scenario that you can play. And
I think this is actually a super tool because for me, for example, coming from Guadeloupe, the internet has never been as efficient as France initially. And when the first online, ADSL at the time came in, we had so crazy ping. And I remember playing World of Warcraft and being so mad that all my friends had amazing internet and me not. And now understanding how multiplayer works, help understand that frustration. But being able to emulate that when you build your game is super important for inclusivity. If you're planning of making a game that will be published worldwide, you want to be able to cater to your audience that have that are part of the world that have lesser internet power or that have issues with the internet or not a stable connection and so on. Now we have Starlink for very remote locations, but even with that, sometimes those issues can happen. So I think what you just said is so important for a developer to think about. Those tools are here right in Unity for you to simulate what does it feel like to just lose connection and see in real time your game and plan for that in terms of the UX of the experience itself.
And also it's the same thing as like for people that are not familiar with multiplayer like development. It's like think of making your game for a mobile device for Android. Well, then how many Android devices are out there, and with what many resources? How much CPU? How much GPU? The same way that it's good to test on very low end devices, to make sure that your game runs on the latest iPad or the latest Galaxy S24, Galaxy S20, 20,000. I don't know what's the latest number.
What's the number now?
The same way that you test on a higher end device, you should also that lower end device, the lowest that you're supporting, that's your base. That's your base right there. Like, and that's your base amount of resources. Like, and if anything, you can scale up for when you know you're playing on a particular other device. That's another kind of optimization, but or kind of a way that you can diverse on like how your game can be. But you always need a base on like what is the less amount of resources that I need, and you can think of it that way with internet, like how much data do I need to send online. But Caleb, I'm really curious, like as somebody with much more technical depth, kind of curious about your outlook on that.
I think you covered something really interesting just then, which is when you go to test your game, when it's multiplayer, you need to add a couple other dimensions to it, and one of them is network conditioning. And I'm pulling up Unity right now to see where it's located in the menu. But there's tooling like built into multiplayer tools alongside the Netcode libraries for you to actually plug that in and simulate how that's going to play. And as Manuel was talking about just a second ago, the latency between places is real. I think I was just looking at worldwide pings yesterday. What I do for fun, and London to Tokyo, I think right now is like 285 milliseconds listed there. And so that latency, like you need to deal with that. And that doesn't include things like disruption. So what's great about the network simulating tools and conditioning tools is it allows you to say like, let's have a packet loss. And a packet loss happens, it happens a lot across internet hardware as you're communicating, and modern internet's made to deal with that. But when you lose a packet, your netcode layer and the transport layer underneath that is going to attempt to deal with that. And your game may need to deal with when you don't receive a piece of information in time. So disruption, connectivity, we'll talk about maybe NATs and firewalls later if we have time. But yeah, it's useful in Unity to have that toolkit available there so that you can sort of see what's going to happen. So when you're testing on a targeted platform like an older Android device, you also have to consider things like over a Wi-Fi network or a Starlink network or a hardwired network, what conditions might occur that are going to cause your game quality and the experience to degrade. We all know what it looks like when the disruption screen pops up, and the goal is to kind of try and push for a higher latency ceiling in your game. I'm going to say a number, and I'm curious to see if Johnny has an opinion about that number. Sorry to put you on the spot. When I've seen it, if you're just getting started and you're trying to figure out how to think about that, it depends on the genre. But I've seen like 100 to like 150 millisecond clean operating window for a type of maybe not twitchy game, but like a real-time synchronous game. Depends on the mechanics, but if you need something to plug into the conditioning window, that would not be a bad place to start.
Yeah. I think 100 milliseconds or so is a good baseline, because again, you figure 100 milliseconds, that's 1/10 of 1 second. So that's still definitely going to be noticeable at that point, where it has a little bit of delay when you're actually receiving that information. I think that's kind of like one of the difficulties just about multiplayer development in general is, we have to deal with the internet, and the internet is fallible. It has, all these issues like latency where, certain data takes some certain amount of time to get from one computer to another, or, maybe even through an intermediate server, and that can add some more time. And then also, Caleb, you mentioned packet loss, where of course, one computer is sending data and then the other computer just never receives that data. So it's kind of like, how do you handle all these situations? For the case of packet loss, sometimes you don't necessarily need to worry about it, because if you're just synchronizing unimportant positional data, and you don't receive 1 or 2 updates, that's totally fine, because later on you're going to receive another positional update and it's just going to replace that value. But for something that's happens like not as frequently, like input, like if player press like an attack key, and that attack is only true for that one specific network update, and the other machine never receives that, then that's going to be a problem, because one person thinks that they fired their attack, but then the other computer is just it doesn't happen on that simulation. So you kind of have to add in some redundancy, and again, speaking of, I know specifically with Netcode for entities, they have like a little bit of a buffer where when they're sending this input data, they're actually sending like the last, say, 5 or so updates. So, you know, even if 1 or 2 or even 3 packets, got dropped, then at some point they can still kind of look back and say, oh, hey, a couple network updates ago, this input was received. And then so now, again, kind of teasing some topics for Netcode for entities, it can kind of like basically go back in time and say, okay, at this point, this player pressed this input, let's go ahead and then now re-simulate what happened, now knowing that new information that packet was received. So
I love that example. That kind of touched back on what Caleb was saying about that resynchronization and making sure that you kind of make sure that the 2 players or the multiple players together are always on sync. I'm going to quickly read a few comments because I know people might wonder, is this pre-recorded? No, it's not. It's fully live, prone to error, and will be in the editor in a few. So you will see that the demo gods are not always with us. So we asked earlier, what was your worst ping? I think it's fun to read a few answers on that. People are saying 40,000 milliseconds. Playing League of Legends with 300 milliseconds is the worst. Yeah, I agree. I've been there. Obviously 944 on a game called Free Fire. And then someone saying, why multiplayer? Why not just a good single player? I think the way I would answer that is that it's just to give the choice to creators, right? Like not every game needs to be the same. Some of my best experiences in gaming have been playing with friends, whether it's local gaming or online gaming. There's been amazing multiplayer games out there. But I think that not every perfect game has been a multiplayer game. But there's always space for single player, even nowadays. Great experiences come from single player. But also, the best game is maybe not yet invented. So giving the choice to creators and allowing them to have all of these tools so that they can make their vision go to life is why Unity exists. So all of the tools that we're covering today, we're trying to answer all questions at the same time in the chat, is to give you those possibilities. And we'll be continuing to share links, obviously. We have a lot of resources at the end, so make sure you stick to the end. Right now, we're going to get into the Netcode for game object before we get to Netcode for entities so that you can see a little bit of the difference.
So, and by the way, to your point, Manu, like it's true. Like one of my best favorite games of all time have been adventure games, like Ocarina of Time, single player games. Like
Same.
Like, definitely. No. Like, I don't think anybody in Unity is gonna say like, yeah, only multiplayer games or only single player games. No,
right? They're not mutually
the choice is
exclusive.
yours.
Yeah, exactly. Very well said, Jordan. And by the way, real quick, also to address something like, I think it was Manu and Freeman. I think so. We're so excited that I think we shared it twice, but we shared the link to the bite-sized samples, which is a small, very focused small games for you to get started on using Netcode for game objects. And in fact, and these samples have actually been on development like since for years, since I even started on this job. So they've gotten better and better, and sincerely I recommend them. And there's there's actually 4 of them: Space Invaders, Space 2D Space Shooter, and the Client Driven. No, sorry, 3. I don't know why I blanked out on that one. But there's one 3D one and 2 2D games as well to like cover a good basis. But it covers everything from object spawning, synchronization of animation, of transform, and even object parenting. The Client Driven one has like parenting, so like when you want to claim a particular object and carry it over your head or something, so that covers that up as well. And also 2 of the samples cover object pooling, which is an advanced feature. So like
so definitely make sure to scroll up the chat and click on that link. When Esteban shares it during his talk, that's where people are pulling up their phone and clicking on the QR code. I remember this one.
Recently, Johnny, are you gonna get a lot of viewers in Seattle yesterday? I was like, go to this course. This dude covered this really well. So you're probably gonna get like 30 something more views right there. Hey, good. We gotta share good resources, whether from
people
us or
are
from
reacting to what you're saying, Esteban. Like, bring back the LAN parties.
Yeah, I mean that's true. That is still a multiplayer game, but yeah.
Awesome.
And
So let's
also
talk about.
one thing. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead,
Manu.
please.
No, I was gonna say one thing that because I'm really excited, like just for people to see this. Manu, Caleb, Johnny, did you see that cool trailer yesterday from the VR people, the VR
Yes, so
sample
I
scenes?
cannot wait to show it to people. We actually have it as one of our visuals there. I think that's exactly where we're going with Netcode for game objects, right?
No,
All right,
but
let's do it.
yeah,
Perfect. So we want to make game objects move. I think is the first section of that part. Yeah. So this is the
There we go.
VR sample.
so they I believe that we released this like yesterday or like a few days ago, but like it is now available and you can download it on the Unity Hub. I went ahead and tried it. I believe it started showing up in the latest version of 2022 LTS and Unity 6. At least with 2022.37 LTS, it showed up, and you go to the Unity Hub. So the same way that you can also add the newest URP sample, now there's an additional template called the VR multiplayer, and I'm super happy to try this. I haven't tried this out myself. Like I need to build it and put and try it on my own Quest 2. So
it works on Quest 2, it works on Quest 3, and I have to say the authoring team at Unity has done a fantastic job on this sample. It's a lot of work behind this. I started at Unity 3 years ago as a product designer, and some of the UI you're seeing right now are some of the work from my team at the time that has been translated as a design system that now works across platform, across multiple devices, and now in VR. So this is a lot of work that has been put into this, and I think the team is really proud of it. So definitely go and try it. It's now available on the Unity Hub, and it even have Vivox for voice chat.
Yeah. Although what we're seeing right now is the Mega City Metro, the Mega City Metro site. So this is the visual sign that we're in the section for Netcode for entities. So yeah, Netcode for entities. The Netcode for game objects was to synchronize game objects, and Netcode for entities is your way to be making action games with dots, so they can make online multiplayer that are more towards action games. Like as you can see, some of this gameplay like Mega City Metro, like can support many players, whereas Netcode for entities is usually recommended a small amount of players, like 8. I think maybe 16 is like a good maximum. Even though that's not hard set, you can definitely try and modify the package yourself if you want, and make it support other players. But it's just usually recommended for a smaller amount of players. Whereas Netcode for entities can definitely like right out of the box can support a much higher amount of players. And this is why this game is built with a very big level in mind. In fact, I can't wait for you, because we're getting close to Johnny's section on his course, on his Netcode for entities course that he built. Which, by the way, I used it for my own personal development, and also for even to understand a lot of these concepts. It's really that good. But Caleb, anything you wanted to add about Netcode for entities at the moment? Like, were you part of some of the development?
No. There's a very foundationally strong group of people who are very familiar with DOTS. For those in the stream or who are watching who don't know, DOTS is our data-oriented tech stack. There's a lot of material that covers data-oriented tech stack versus an object-oriented tech stack. And
we had a live stream on that a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
actually.
Fantastic.
You can find it on YouTube, by the way. It's always in our playlist. So go into the Let's Dev series and you can find the DOTS one always.
Perfect. There's the plug. I'll quickly, because we have these 2 Netcode stacks, I wanted to briefly just address that. And then as we dive deeper into entities, we'll hand off to Johnny to walk us through how his course works and what he's learned. And how he brings people into space. Kind of concluding maybe on, I saw some questions in chat related to Netcode for game objects. I think when you're approaching this, as you'll see later, we can help you make that choice, and we're starting to bring that cohesion into the Unity engine with Unity 6. Netcode for game objects is going to be very familiar. You're going to use it with your familiar Netcode-based authoring. It plugs right into the scene hierarchy. It has all the components that you would expect from a native Unity development experience. And so it has an immediately good productive feel to it. And as Esmo was just saying, having a reasonable network scale that goes alongside with a game object based workflow, that's going to work really well. So that the VR sample that we just saw was a perfect use for that. And Netcode for game objects is a totally reasonable choice when you're making those type, especially social experiences. When you start getting to higher network scaled objects, when you start looking into needing tighter gameplay, you're going to have like more players playing simultaneously, especially around advanced netcode features like client prediction and server rewind. Netcode for game objects, which doesn't necessarily have those, you start to need to look to Netcode for entities, which is going to be like slightly more advanced, but also more capable. And so we'll talk about how you make that choice in Unity 6 later. But I think that's a good intro to start leaning into Netcode for entities, which is what we've seen on screen with this large scale sample. Getting this many things in the scene and having a networked game with those ray castings is really cool. So maybe now we can switch directly into multiplayer course, Johnny.
Johnny,
Cool.
the floor is yours.
Sounds great to me. Well, yeah, so just kind of tagging off what Caleb said right there, just kind of contrasting Netcode for game objects versus Netcode for entities. I think one of the main advantages of Netcode for game objects is that it just works really well with the existing Unity workflow that most people are extremely familiar with. And it is pretty easy to get up and running. I've had the pleasure of working on a few Netcode for game object based projects, and it's been easy to set up. It's worked really well. And by the way, I am really glad about the whole new networked VR sample, because I actually have worked on a couple VR projects, and a lot of them want networking, that social aspect, and there kind of have been some challenges and things to work through to get everything set up correctly. So I'm glad that that's kind of all, available as a sample to build off of now. So that's awesome. So then to kind of contrast that with Netcode for entities. So Netcode for entities is based off of Unity's entity component system. So you have to use, the ECS workflow, which works a little bit different within the editor. But especially on the code side, it's completely different than a game object based workflow. Again, probably going into all the specific details of that is way out the scope of this video, but of course, like some of the other people mentioned, Unity has done some streams in the past, and of course I have plenty of resources available on my channel to kind of familiarize yourself with ECS and kind of that whole development workflow, and a lot of the awesome advantages of it and everything. So yeah, again, if you are wanting to go towards Netcode for entities, that's going to be, a little bit more specific if you want to make maybe a more, competitive game where, it's really important for, say, accuracy of simulation, and you just kind of want, updates to happen as quick as possible. So I guess do we just want to go ahead and do a little kind of overview about, what the course is and kind of some, of the tools available and everything?
Let's do it.
Cool. Sounds good to me. So yeah, this is it running in the editor. So this is, again, the course that I have available on my YouTube channel. I basically go through the entire process of creating this game from beginning to end. I should note that you should have like a little bit of familiarity with Unity ECS before kind of diving into this, because some of those concepts might be a little overwhelming if you've never seen that before. But yeah, again, like we've mentioned, this is kind of like a little bit of a MOBA game. So I can go ahead and enter play mode and just kind of give you all a quick little view about how this is all set up. So again, I kind of have just this little connection screen where you can kind of specify if you're the host, meaning this instance of the game is acting as the server as well as a client that can kind of connect to a simulation. Or if we're doing, we could do a server only build where we basically have it only running the server simulation. The person controlling this instance doesn't have like a player they can control. And then there's a client only version where, if a server is already running, we can connect to that client. And then kind of going into, some of the other networking things, for this instance, we can specify the IP address of the server that we want to connect to. In this case, I'm running it locally on my machine, so I'm using just the local loopback address here. And then the connection port is basically, it's kind of like, if you consider like an IP address as the address of a building, then the port would be like the door number or apartment number of that building. So it's kind of like one specific room in that. And then again, that's kind of in the case of Netcode, kind of where the actual communication is taking place across the network. So we can go ahead and basically enter the little game here. You see that our game is starting. So right now I just kind of have like some simulated what are called thin clients. So basically, I can kind of talk about what that is in a sec. But right now they're just kind of simulating their kind of random movement. So they're basically kind of simulating what it would be like to have other players in the game. And then these groups of 3, these are just kind of like the main minions who are kind of moving across the map. And as we go across, we can see that there are players on the red team. So these guys are, again, just kind of doing their random movement. And then we have kind of the little minions, and these guys kind of do some little automatic attacking of each other. And you can see that, they have little health bars that go down. And then, of course, us as the player, we can send out attacks. So we have this ability, which is kind of like an area of effect type one. And then another one, which is more of like a skill shot one, where we can kind of shoot a shot out into the world there. And then,
I
of
wish
course,
list your game on Steam, please.
this game is not quite on Steam yet, but hey, maybe I build off of it, or somebody else who follows along with the course builds off of it, and make something cool.
I think it's a fantastic example, though, to break the bones of what is a MOBA game and like really understand how it works on the multiplayer side of it.
Yeah, totally.
Johnny, when I was following your course, like one of the cool things about like those little bars of UI, remind me, because it's been a while since I like started again, but those are game objects, right? Each of those bars.
Yeah.
Like that was, I was so like, that's so cool. Like he's using the game objects world on like an actual template on top of the dots world to like display the health bar of each of those entities. That's so cool. And with this course, I actually learned about the cleanup component.
Oh yeah,
I was like, oh wow, no way, I didn't know dots had that. Like that's so cool. Like so even people with some experience in dots, you trust me, you will learn some dot stuff that can apply to both single player and online multiplayer games in this. But yeah, it was so cool.
Yeah, definitely. And just to kind of tell the reason for that is because Unity ECS doesn't have a native UI solution, so we still have to use game objects for that. And then I kind of have some logic to basically synchronize the position of the health bar with the position of the associated entity. And then it, of course, also displays the live data so that, when a player gets attacked, the health bar ends up kind of going down. And then the concept of a cleanup component basically allows it to, when the entity gets destroyed, it can kind of also destroy that game object. So that's, again, just kind of like a high level overview of what the game is. Couple other things that I do want to point out is I think we mentioned some of these play mode tools before. So these have been super awesome for testing. So we can kind of select what play mode type. So again, this is, I'm kind of overriding this, doing kind of my own logic that you saw on that kind of initial login screen. But again, if you don't have that set up quite yet, you're in the very early stages of development, you can specify right here if you're creating, client server, just regular client, or just a server. And then also this is kind of where we set up the number of thin clients. So again, you saw that I have a total of 9 thin clients, and then plus myself playing the game. That means this is basically a 5v5 version of the game. So there's 10 people all playing in at once. And then here's where we get into some of the more kind of interesting stuff about network emulation. So what we can specify here is the different delay in milliseconds. So if we wanted to say set a 100 millisecond delay, we could do that there. And then the jitter is essentially like the plus or minus value of that. So it is just going to be kind of like a random ping based off of that. So if we could say like, a jitter of say 50 milliseconds, that means that, at any given time, our delay in milliseconds is going to be, some random value between 50 and 150. Now that's important to account for because in the real world, you're never like, if you're at 100 milliseconds ping, it's not going to be exactly 100 milliseconds ping every single time. One time it'll be 80, one time it'll be 125, one time it might be, 100, sometimes it'll be down to 50. So it's going to be kind of all over the place. And again, that's kind of like a factor that you can measure with a lot of just kind of regularly available speed test tools online to see kind of, what essentially the delta of your latency is. So that's kind of like an important thing to know and account for. And you can also set the packet drop percentage. It's really cool because again, you can kind of hover over all these values and it gives you a little bit of information about, what that means. So if you're not familiar with the concept of, the packet drop percentage, which is basically, how many essentially packets are lost, you can kind of read about that there. Go ahead and set that value. There's also a lag spike simulator. So I'm sure many people who have played multiplayer games are, maybe familiar with this, where they're kind of playing, everything is all well and good. And then just out of nowhere, someone just kind of like freezes for like 2 seconds or so. And then, it's just, right back to normal. So again, that's just kind of like somewhere along the line of all these networked computers connected and talking to each other, something went wrong. And then, there's kind of some lag spike for, a second or two, and then all of a sudden things are back. So again, it's awesome that Unity gives you all these tools so you can really see what happens, in these real world scenarios where there are some networking issues, and you can kind of figure out how you handle those in your game.
Hey Johnny, can we play the demo again? But like as the game is going, you kind of like bump up the delay really high just to mess with it, like.
Yeah, we could kind of see. I'm not sure how much we'll be able to actually see because, I don't know how much we would actually be able to see with thin clients. But if I had like another instance of the game running, that's really when we'd be able to tell if we had those two kind of side by side, where like one person, kind of what you would see is like, one person would start moving. And then it would take, a second or so to actually update that across. So I don't know if I have a build handy where I could kind of show those side by side, though, unfortunately.
No, it's all good. But I will say, like, one of the things I remember from your course, and you actually discuss this because like some of these entities are actually predicted. Like remind me, the player itself, like the actual avatar that you control, is also like. It's taking advantage of Netcode for Entities client-side prediction.
That's correct. Yeah. So what client-side prediction basically means is, again, we've kind of talked about this concept of latency, where when I send an input saying, okay, I'm going to move my player to this position, of course, it's not that exact instant that all the other connected players have that information. There's going to be a little bit of a delay, which is kind of that latency value that's typically tracked in multiplayer games. So again, if your latency is 100 milliseconds, that's going to be 1/10 of a second until the other machine receives that information saying, this player is moving to this location. Now that ends up being a problem because if at that time that it was received, and then it starts moving at that point, then there's going to be 1/10 of a second delay. So on the client, it's going to be basically 1/10 of a second ahead, and like the other machine who's receiving that information, that's going to be behind. And you don't want that to happen, especially in a competitive game where you're trying to line up a shot, and if they're a whole 1/10 of a second behind, you're never gonna make that. So what client prediction basically does is it receives that input saying, this client is moving to this position, but also has a essentially a timestamp, kind of known as the network tick, which is, something consistent from the server that all clients can kind of agree on. And it says, okay, so this input was received at this network tick. So what it actually does is it kind of rolls back the local client to that point in the networking, saying, okay, so the player started moving at this point. Let's go ahead and re-simulate what would happen based off of all the other inputs and everything like that that were received. Let's go ahead and re-simulate that and get it to the point where my local machine is at right now. So then that way the player basically can kind of like catch up. So again, like we were just kind of mentioning, if there's a large amount of latency, what's going to happen is, when a player moves, that player is going to be frozen for that, 10th of a second or so, but then they're going to jump. They're going to jump to, where they should be, and then they're going to just continue moving normally from there.
I'll take a quick parenthesis just to give a quick shout out to Bonte Kochanek, which is part of the team at Sanctuary Second Sun. We actually have a live stream with them next week at the same time. So
nice.
Quick promo, just for those that follows, and then we run back into the demo.
Bonte is awesome. I met him at GDC, and he's always in the Turbo Makes Games chat when I do the live stream. So yeah,
awesome. Let's go.
But yeah, honestly, like Johnny, thank you very much. Like this course is like sincerely, people. I know that 6 hours sounds a lot, but trust me, when trust me, it's very good for when you want to learn how to make these action games, and when you want to use this SDK, this Netcode SDK. So it's a complex topic, but you can achieve very cool things with it. So definitely, it's worth the investment in terms of like a training time and everything. And it's think of it about I think of it like a free Udemy course. Really, it's kind of
100%. That's the thing about Esteban's feedback, is that when you say trust me, you better trust him, because he doesn't say that a lot. So if he says it's a good one, let's believe it is.
Yeah.
But seriously, thank you, Johnny, for this. That was really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I think our next section is about Unity number 6, update to multiplayer. You've heard a lot about that number this year. Obviously, we have a big rollout of information leading up to Unite. So for those of you that are in Barcelona around September, please join us at Unite. There's going to be a lot of announcement, and Unity 6 is the big event name for this. So we have a lot of updates for multiplayer at Unity 6. So we want to start with maybe what are the options and what do they mean?
This section right here. We're gonna show a little bit, but like you're gonna see on the B-roll, like some of these new multiplayer tools. But I like Caleb to take in and speak about what we're showing here, because Caleb has been very involved in the development of these services. So Caleb, feel free.
Yeah.
What are we saying?
Yeah, I'll actually start with a question to Johnny. Johnny, when you're starting with a new project, and even as part of your course, how long does it typically take to really get to the part where you're trying out the main idea that you're trying to conceptually validate?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely varies depending on what I'm trying to do. How complex it is. For the Netcode for Entities specific one, there was definitely a lot of initial hurdles for me to get up and running. Because we didn't really dive into this too much, but Netcode for Entities is a server authoritative model. So that basically means that any changes in the application can only happen on the server. And so that gets kind of confusing, because you can't just say on the local client, send an attack or change your position. Like, you actually kind of end up sending a request up to the server saying, hey, can I move? And then the server essentially validates that logic. And then they say, yes, you can move, or no, you can't, kind of thing. So the server kind of has the final say. So there were definitely like a lot of mental hurdles that I had to kind of get across to, fall into that pattern. And then, of course, they're just kind of like little weird quirks about how Netcode for Entities works, because again, it's kind of different than the regular Unity workflow. And, that's just, again, different things that you need to consider. But what I will say, which has been extremely valuable resource, is the Netcode for Entities forums. The developers of Netcode for Entities are extremely active on there. So, any question that I had, no matter how simple or complex, they were always there to, give me very detailed feedback and information about, what was going on. So that was an extremely helpful resource for me to kind of, get up and running with things.
Yeah, I mean, that closely aligns with a lot of the feedback that we've heard. Basically, like not only onboarding to the conceptual issues, right, in that initial education and onboarding, but also all those like idiosyncrasies and boilerplate that you have to overcome just to get to the part where you're trying out your idea. And we can bring up that B-roll again. So as part of Unity 6, we want to simplify basically like the amount of time, the amount of boilerplate, the amount of like conceptual burden that you're stuck trying to decide when you just want to get to trying out your idea and you open a new project, you have hopes and dreams and you want to try them out and see if you can't bring them to life. And so as part of Unity 6, we have this new thing that we're calling Multiplayer Center. And right now you're kind of seeing the install path in Unity 6 is you can go to the package manager. You can try this out today, go turn on experimental packages, grab it, click it, and then get that package in view. And if we go to the next video, and I think we're supposed to call out, apologies if you're on mobile viewing this. We recorded this particular part at a lower resolution, but if you go to the PC later and check it out, you'll be able to see it in its full form. Right, so Esteban, did you want to add to that?
No, one more thing I wanted to make sure to people know is that some of these solutions, like even though we're excited for you to try them out and everything, like there's a reason they're tagged experimental, and even Unity, like even when we in our own documentation we have like we don't recommend that you use these for production ready games. Like definitely try them out, give us feedback, but some of these solutions, when it's experimental in general, whether it's multiplayer or not, definitely use them more for like stuff you want to test out, like prototyping or make proof of concepts, vertical slices. But these packages are in active development. So
right, great safe harbor statement there. Yeah, so
indeed,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what you're seeing here is Multiplayer Center's recommendation system. And so you can come in here, you can say something about your inspiration, what type of genre you're attempting to prototype in. The genre has a big effect on what type of tech stack you're going to use inside of your game and what type of workflow you need. And what's great is you don't have to take my word for it. As you click through, it explains some of the decisions that it's making. Once you pick that, you also pick the number, your player count as well. Forward to the next one. Yeah, perfect. And from there, you can also make additional changes to like some advanced ideas, like is this slow or fast paced? If you have a business model that relies on competitive play, you might want to say something about where the authority of your game needs to sit. And what that does is it allows you to see the full spectrum, navigate the solution space for multiplayer tech stack, check the things you need, read the explanations, help you make the decision. And then it's sort of a macro at the bottom to install the packages, which is basically the same experience as using the package manager, but now you're focused on specifically navigating what packages you want for multiplayer. And so we can see
these
on
experimental packages only work with Unity 6?
Right. Yeah. Yes, with caveat. I would say go to the documentation and some of the stuff we'll have for which things are compatible with which sections of which editor versions. Yeah. So here we have Netcode solution. You can pick between Netcode for game objects. I think custom might also be an option there if you want to fall back to the transport under the hood. Your hosting model, client hosted, server hosted. And then we also have Vivox voice chat, the multiplayer services package, which gives you a session system to simplify some of that boilerplate connectivity. Multiplayer widgets, which are very cool, we'll talk about in a second. And then finally, one of my favorite tools is the multiplayer play mode. We can go to the next little clip. Yes. So once you have all these packages, like what do you do? And this to me is when I don't know. This is the part where like it gets really interesting. You can basically click to modify your currently open scene to just start dropping in. And I did this with Esteban the other day, and it was to great effect. Maybe Esteban, you have a testimonial.
I was blown away when I first saw this.
I did this the other day, a year ago, just messing around with my own multiplayer game, and it took me a while just to get to the part where I'd like some of the stuff you're going to see here. And so it's really cool to see that the team has managed to get to this point where you can basically click a button and you get into some of the tutorials and samples that you would have read are now just being injected directly into your scene, into your assets, and you're in control. So what we just saw there was the basic netcode for game objects scene. It takes you to a place where you can start a client, start a server, hit play, and then bring your cube into the scene and start moving it around, and it's a networked cube. And we can also see some other ones here, which I think we explore. We can move on to the next clip. Sure, narrating.
This one, I believe.
Yeah, Esteban, do you want to talk about play mode?
No. Go ahead, Caleb.
Okay. And this is almost directly referencing the thing Johnny was doing earlier, where we're like, hey, we want to see these things side by side. And the reason for it, and Johnny, correct me if I'm wrong, was you didn't have a build, so you couldn't show, like you had thin clients. And correct, sometimes you want to have a client and the host live at the same time. And there's solutions out there for this. And we've made one as well. And so here you can actually spin up some additional editor windows that will run as their own individual player runtime. And so in this case, it's activating for player 2 right now. And what this allows you to do, this also has some additional configuration that's definitely worth exploring more as you want to customize the way these players run, is when you hit play, you will see an additional window pop up and basically run on its own with its own console. And it'll be right in the Unity editor. You don't necessarily have to go spin out a separate Symlink clone and deal with the lifecycle of those two things. Every time you make a co-edit, it updates both with their own import assets flow. This is built into Unity, which is very cool. I think it's going to have a big impact on how people iterate. So now you're seeing that second one pop open. And I think in this clip, we actually click play, if I'm not mistaken.
I think at the next one, yeah.
Is it in the next one? Okay.
Wait.
Moving out of the way. There we go.
There we go.
I mean, this is the cool part, right? Is you click play, you have that kind of boilerplate, very basic widget that's there that allows you to start in host mode or client mode. Get the resolution right here. So we have our first cube. And I think the default setup here is just to run over localhost so you can just get started right away. So right now there's no internet connectivity happening. It's just running against your 127.0.0.1 localhost. And so yeah, right away you already have two cubes moving around. And if you wanted to have two points of view, your two players on scene, you just to recap what we just did, we used the recommendation system to install packages. We added this getting started widget directly to the scene, enabled play mode and hit play. And now I have two network cubes and I can start to like play around with what, with some netcode for game objects tutorials and start to make progress against the idea. Let's pop on to the next one. S1, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
That this is already saving you. Like it might not seem as much because some people are like, those are just two cubes, but it's not like the actual content that you see. It's like the boilerplate work that is saving you, like that's doing it automatically for you. So now the cool thing is that you can concentrate on what matters most, which is actually extending this and making your own prototype, your own, and starting with your own games and focusing on what you want to build. And you already have those components working, synchronizing the movement and everything. And in fact, exactly on the next video, which is even cooler, even though visually looks the same, but Caleb will explain why. We'll definitely say why. Because we're going to be adding the widgets. Caleb,
yes.
Take it away.
Yeah, widgets. So a second ago, I was talking about the fact that you're still on 127.0.0.1. That's localhost. I can't go out to the internet yet. And to do that, there's some necessary UI scaffolding that I end up adding to my game. And Johnny, you had that scaffolding as well. It was your in-game UI to go from a runtime that knows nothing about what we're doing to one that's connected to a game with other people. And so what's new in Unity 6 is there's this new concept of widgets. And so you can right click and drop a widget into your game. And the widgets integrate with the multiplayer SDK and the session system. So you can simply start dropping in these UI scaffolding. You'll be able to click play and then get the immediate across the internet features that you would normally be trying to get by adding these UI elements. So right now we've added a we got rid of the quick create that had just client and local host, and now we're starting to add some features like creating a session with a name. I think there's a join one as well where you can plug an ID in. We just added the session list widget. And there's a join at the bottom. So when you click on a session, you can actually click join to directly join the one that's selected. And I think the last thing that was added was the join code UI reference. So if you've seen those types of games, they have their like 4-letter code, 5-letter code on screen. We've made this like simple thing so you can just drop it in. The idea is you just kind of want to hit play and start messing around. You want to make a build and give it to someone. And that UI scaffolding allows for those two devices running those game clients to kind of work almost regardless of whatever your network situation is, pending some type of like corporate firewall or issue like that. It even has relay integration out of the box. So traversing your NAT, if you've ever seen that message, you have a strict NAT, you can't connect. That's what the relay system allows you to circumvent. And so I think what we've seen now is a loop of the create, the join on ID, the join code UI, and then the session list. And I think if we go to the next video, we actually see them all in action, right? And so this is super cool to see finally. This UI scaffolding, I mean, this is the part that I got stuck on because I don't know a ton about Unity UI development. And so when I was messing around with this, I found myself almost back in my web development days doing flex canvases and trying to figure out how to lay things out.
It used to work like divs almost, like the old way of HTML.
And so now on the left, we created a session and named it. And on the right, we have hit refresh, clicked on the session and clicked join. And now these two builds can run on two devices across the internet using the Unity, behind the scenes, it's using Unity Lobby and the Unity relay service in order to create those connections and have that rallying locator in the session system. And then it hands off to the scene to do the network manager connection. If you're familiar with Netcode for game objects, that's the method it uses to manage the way that the actual game scene simulation gets loaded and kicked off. And so, Esteban, if you let me, I'll kind of recap here. Sure. I opened a new Unity project. I installed the multiplayer center. I went to the multiplayer recommendation. I plugged in some information about my game. It told me what tech stack I should probably explore. I could learn more if I wanted to at that point. I installed it, recommendations, dropped some stuff in my scene. I added some necessary UI scaffolding, skipped several hours of boilerplate, and ended up with, I'm directly into my prototyping phase. I don't have to do additional work at that point. So if you're breaking out of your game, even if you have a game development thing that's happening, I know I do this a lot. I'll make a new project just to test out an idea, and I'm so much more productive. The daunting factor of I need to make a new project to try something out decreases drastically when you can kind of just take this and drop it in and get started.
Caleb, real quick, one more thing that I tried out yesterday, but literally yesterday, this scene that you built, this default scene, if you build it to Android, it actually works. It doesn't have the default UI to move the cube from the Android device, but if you move if you move the cubes from your PC, and if you have a Mac or something, you actually see the synchronization of the cubes and everything on your phone. Well, so the UI works to create the session, and to join it. But the movement of the cube is what doesn't work. But the cool point is that, hey, you can already right out of the box build this to an Android and test it out.
Well, you were probably even running the server, the host in this case, from the Unity editor. So you don't even have to make a build for one of the clients. You can just you can be debugging live what's going on while having your friend trying it out, and you're the admin of the game effectively while they're playing with the game client. Johnny, I'm curious to get your, I don't know if you've seen this, I'm curious to get your sort of raw thoughts.
Yeah, no, these tools are awesome because, even though I'm kind of more of like a power user, like I kind of know the packages and everything that I want to install, there still is a process of, actually installing all those packages. So just to have like, a place where I can just like hit one button and everything's just set up for me already, that's fantastic. By the way, the multiplayer play mode, again, not something I've been able to play around with myself yet, but I just think that's such a fantastic concept because, again, like I mentioned, if I wanted to test with multiple clients in my Netcode for Entities project, I, had to create a build of that, which ended up being really annoying when I want to do like fast iteration and I'm like, testing a lot of networking things, because, pretty much every time I ran a build, it would take, anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes. So, if I'm trying to go quickly and just, change little small things, say, okay, did that, fix that issue there? There was a lot of waiting where I had to kind of like wait for builds and everything. And then, so yeah, having the multiplayer play mode tools where I can have, pretty much instantly have, 2 simulations of the game running right there. Also, I thought it was super cool that all the clients have their own individual consoles associated with them, so you can see all the debug messages. You don't have to like go into the player log and read through all the text in the raw file. It's a nice, easy to display thing right there. So
It's just right
I
there
think all
for
that
you.
stuff is great. Yeah.
The chat seems to agree. People saying this is a big feature. I'm excited for the future of Unity multiplayer. So yeah, thank you for this showcase.
One of the
Caleb.
cool things I like is that this is already like game jam friendly because like now you can you've taken a lot of the boilerplate code, so even on a game jam I think it's now easier to actually do an online multiplayer game. Like
We have a
all of
live
this is set up
question.
for you.
Can I use this system with a custom server or player host server, or am I bound to the Unity Online infrastructure?
Yeah, I can probably hop in on that one. There's definitely no limits to what you can do with the Unity game engine. So if you want to spin out a Linux build and like a game server build, if you're familiar with building game servers in Unity, you can take that and go host it somewhere. The transport system is also modular, and you can swap that out. You can also use the transport system directly. There's several different options. Just like with most engines, it's kind of built in layers. And so customization can take you pretty far. In terms of like Unity Lobby versus Unity Relay, I do believe the scaffolding, the UI scaffolding and widgets that's there to help you quickly onboard and prototyping, it's currently locked up with just for simplicity with some of the Unity gaming services. So that was Lobby and Relay. But I know that there's a rich ecosystem of solutions out there that also can take you to other infrastructure providers.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So, Tom, I hope that answered your question. Bonte is saying that is a great question. So, even our next host was interested. Perfect. Let's move on to our next and last section before we wrap up. So, Unity gaming services, I think you just talked a little bit about Lobby and Relay, game server hosting and matchmaking as well.
Yeah, Esteban, I'm happy to cover some gaming services concepts.
Please do.
Great.
Please do.
Yeah, so Unity Gaming Services came out a few years ago, and it is a mixture of things, but most of what's necessary to make a game, go online and have the necessary infrastructure to run the game. So some of that is multiplayer infrastructure, some of that is the infrastructure to host content, to change and live operate components of your game ecosystem, control the player journey, your economy. So there's a lot of features out there that I highly recommend people go explore. We have a great solutions page up on the website if you want to go explore more about Unity Gaming Services. In the multiplayer space, we do have a set of solutions that I think solve some of the fundamental issues of multiplayer. So Lobby is like a room session system that lets you invite players, lock it down, have that familiar human readable join code so your friends can join over Discord. It's pastable. It also has other ways to activate. You can also browse lobbies and make an in-game UI browsing thing like we saw in widgets. Relay allows devices to connect over the internet, regardless of the innate strict security of the consumer hardware. Basically, consumer routers and Wi-Fi routers and however the players are connecting to the internet may not allow them to directly connect to each other. There's also other concerns like player privacy for why you wouldn't necessarily want to give someone a direct connection between two player devices. So Relay is there to just connect the devices over the internet. And that SDK is available as well. And it's currently it's shifting from a series of SDKs into the multiplayer services package that you can see in Unity 6. So it's going to simplify and connect some of those different pieces like lobby and relay, and even some connections with voice into sort of a simpler format. And then finally, we have, there's several more, but I think these are the interesting ones for this topic, game server hosting. So you can make your game server and then you can deploy it online on a battle tested, that's the back of the product checkbox part, right? But you could basically take your game server build and go online and be in hundreds of data centers and regions around the world, so you can drive that latency down. It can spin up a game near you, which leads us to the final component, which is matchmaking. It's that magical play button. I think everyone has an intuitive or has experienced matchmaking in their time playing games for this audience. So when you click play, our matchmaking system has customizable rules, so you can explain how roles work in your game, how big of a latency you're going to allow it to develop as players group together. You can even relax the rules over time so that players can at least get into a game. And then that leads directly into the game server allocations, which is where the game server spins up. And the thing you get back, you can connect to, and it boasts some of the greatest latency numbers across the market. So that set of solutions, when you look at widgets, we're really simplifying in Unity 6 as you get started with a new project, kind of like how long it takes to go from I have a game prototype to it's like scalable in a game store marketplace, and I have an audience of people that can play it and get a great play experience. That is the purpose of those services in combination with the new Unity 6 workflows.
And one of the cool things, like, remember when we were talking about, because this Netcode solution, and people in the past used to needed to code this Netcode layer, this transport layer. So even tougher for when you want to have dedicated computers like set up to run your servers. Like now all of this extra work is also done for you. Like if you wanted to host a server somewhere in Asia, that means you like had to set up somewhere like in Asia to hold that computer, like, or in Latin America now. And if I'm not mistaken, Caleb, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 7 total regions that would support: North America, Europe, Latin America, Asia. But I know that definitely multiple regions in which you can put. And the cool thing is that you can configure what builds run in which region of the world. And like Caleb said, like in your matchmaking, like even designer friendly, where you can set up your kinds of games or types of matches on the online portal as well, on the Unity dashboard. But yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, just saying it plainly from the way like I think about it, and I know a lot of the teams here think about it, like the amount of time and energy it should take for someone to like have their game and then have that be available online to play with a great game experience that you don't have to over optimize for with going beyond the veil and acquiring bare metal in data centers. Like that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make that minutes. We're trying to make that minutes. And we've gotten there with a couple things, getting up and running with Matchmaker, getting up and running with game server builds. Obviously there's the build time of the project itself. But yeah, we've gotten it down. I think the last check I had from a kind of a from scratch with getting online with game servers was like less than 10 minutes. That was a small game, nice. By the way. So I don't want to oversell someone who's going to go, I had a fast uplink right. to the internet at the time. Right. So bear that in mind because you're moving big files, but yeah, I mean, globally scalable with the Matchmaker sitting in front of it's really cool to have.
We have a couple questions that I want to go through before we wrap up. So first of all, any plans for Unity to create more learning resources for multiplayer NGO resources in the near future? From Jay Bennett on YouTube.
We can take that question to the Unity Learn team, and in fact, we have a dedicated Discord server for Unity Learn that we should definitely share.
The link is gonna come out in the chat soon. Yeah.
Thank you, Manu. But indeed, like one of the questions that I would say also, like what kind of genres would you like to see? as well. Like that could be cool. Like for example, Johnny made a mobile tutorial, but perhaps other people would like maybe a kind of multiplayer competitive platformer, like kind of like a runner. So definitely send us ideas your way, but at the very least, like if I'm not mistaken, those bite-sized samples that we recommended earlier, and even Mega City Metro is being updated to Unity 6, and the bite-sized samples are also have been maintained to like start using the latest versions of Netcode for game objects, so that they keep being relevant resources for you to learn as well. And at the beginning, we did share that Unity Learn course that we just released, and that one is intended to be used with Unity 6. So yeah. And of course, obviously the NetCheck stream. Sorry about that.
NetCheck stream, yes. Someone said support your local Unity Learn team. 100%. And
Indeed.
I think there's a lot of the team waiting to hear feedback from people. Not everybody knows about our forum or discussion spot. Come and ask the questions. Obviously, in the stream, we have a lot that we cannot answer live, but we are taking this entire transcript, sending it back to the team, and they get converted into content. But if you go on the forum and discussion, you can expose your question on the internet to other users that can create a thread, a conversation, and then you have the entire team actually answering all of those answers. So I think it's important to go there and to ask what you want to see as well, to help the team think about their roadmap for content. Another question from Proton Vibes, this time on our Twitch channel. Hey, just popping in now, just curious, and you probably missed a little bit of what we said before, so apologies, but I'm still going to ask, is the multiplayer going to be something similar to Photon or an entirely different solution? And a quick follow-up question will be along the same lines. Are there going to be features to test the multiplayer as well? Because he used to use VarioPie's Git package, Parallel Sync, to test his games. And it will be nice to be able to do it within Unity and not have to create copies to do so.
So to the last one of using Parallel Sync. Parallel Sync is a very cool like package that even us in development have used it to test our games locally, and it creates a copy of your project. So the play mode tools like reach a certain a similar goal. Like it creates a copy of your project, whereas Parallel Sync, it actually creates like an entire copy of the thing, where the play mode tools like give you what like just what you need. But Parallel Sync, yes, you can still use you should be able to still use Parallel Sync with Unity 6 and Netcode for game objects. So if you prefer that one, definitely go for it. Now, and as for Unity solutions being similar to Photon Quantum, for example, Photon Quantum, that is Photon's ECS engine for making actual multiplayer games. Also very good solution as well. Whereas the similar solution in Unity's tech would be using Netcode for entities and dots together. In particular, the ECS package. Yeah. So it is a similar experience. It's just that with Photon, they basically, if I understand correctly, they use the Unity as basically just the visuals, the graphics, the rendering engine, and then their engine handles all of the simulation, all the core data of it. Caleb, have you tried like some of the Photon solutions?
Yeah, I'm familiar with some of their stuff, and we have partnered with them for like Photon Fusion for the Battle Royale sample that we had at the keynote a few years ago, and that was also released and maintained together. There's a lot of solutions for netcode stacks and gaming services, and Unity is an open platform, so it makes a ton of sense that someone would choose something like that. In terms of like the question of like similarity, netcode stacks are trying to solve similar problems. Gaming services are trying to solve similar problems. There's something that I think Photon does so well is that like interface in their SDK, like start game. Something that I think is similar is the reconsolidation of the multiplayer services SDKs. We're all disparate systems, and we're kind of consolidating closer to like a session system that has semantics like start or matchmake that wrap up lots of functionality. In that sense, I think there's a similarity there, just in terms of like the overall cohesion. But Photon, like you mentioned, like also has Quantum as well, which has its own approach to the actual networking stack. So I think we're just going to see some similarity between the different netcode and gaming services stacks just in the market. And so, yeah.
Perfect. I'm adding a link to the chat regarding Photon as well that Esteban just shared with us. I think it's a great asset for the Battle Royale multiplayer you just mentioned.
Yeah, indeed. Like that sample, they use Photon for the action game, but to sort of for us to like prove that, hey, we have our own netcode solution, but if you want to use Photon or another solution, it's all cool. It's all good. Our gaming services, and particularly this one, the Battle Royale, that one, we proved that we can hook it up to game server hosting and matchmaker. Like, and we showed it. I believe it was GDC 2023 or 2022.
Yeah.
Or believe both of them. But yeah, it's sincerely, these solutions, like, we're not saying like you have to use everything Unity. No. Like,
I actually implemented the matchmaking and some.
Oh, really?
Some of the workflow in that. Yeah.
All right.
So what's so cool about that is it shows that you can use that approach for like. I think the narrative and it goes along with this is you can use Unity to make large scale multiplayer games, and Photon Fusion does a great job of showing that.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So obviously, I know a lot of you guys are just joining us right now, and you're probably having a lot of questions that we might have answered just a little bit early in the stream, like the amazing VR sample we showcased. So quickly, Proton Vibes, yes, to answer your question, some of those solutions and services are actually translating to mixed reality and virtual reality. I would recommend anyone watching us outside of YouTube to go and catch the visual on demand, the VOD of this entire stream. The second it ends, it's on our YouTube. You go into the playlist, Let's Dev, and you will find this stream. You will be able to watch it from the beginning. And if you have more questions, it's not the end. You can go on Discord, you can go on our blog, you can go on our forum and our discussion. All of the links are in the chat right now, so please don't hesitate to look at it. The chat is also tied to the video on demand, so you can continue to scroll back through these links after the video is over. But before we leave, I just want to say a big thank you to the team for joining us today, for providing so much value packed into just 90 minutes of content. I think this was awesome. So thank you, Caleb, Johnny, and Esteban for this. Any last minute words for the team, for the community as well?
Try making multiplayer game. Like, try something small, even if it's just Pong. Something that simple will already start to teach you like that mental change that we were talking about before, like shifting from single player to multiplayer. And in fact, one more thing I would recommend. I shared the link for the Discord server for the Unity. There's a Unity Discord server dedicated for multiplayer sections and stuff about Unity gaming services, Netcode for entities, Netcode for game objects. So please definitely join that. But that's my advice.
Perfect.
Caleb, what would you say?
Yeah, I would just say, I work with the engineering teams and the product and on the R&D side, and we're in the forums and we discuss the topics, and a lot of the engineers are actually in the Discord. So, go there and engage, and we pay attention to the feedback, and that's what's driving a lot of the Unity 6 workflow improvements. And that's, I see that DNA really like setting in, especially the last year as we like get closer and closer to that feedback.
Thank you so much. Johnny, any last minute word?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of just echo what Esteban said, just go ahead and try to build something. I think, we touched on a lot of interesting network topics that might seem a little bit daunting, but I think as you, start to dive into some of these topics yourself and build something, a lot of this stuff will make sense very quickly. So yeah, definitely would just encourage you to just go make something cool.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. And please see you next week, same time, for a Creator Spotlight with Unhurten Media's Sanctuary Shattered Sun. It's going to be an amazing one. And can't wait to see you on the next one. Ciao.